The atmosphere shifted the moment the financials came under scrutiny. Inside negotiating rooms, what was supposed to be a routine discussion spiraled into confrontation as league executives refused to open the books. Players came prepared, armed with ratings data, expansion numbers, and skyrocketing public interest. But owners stuck to the old refrain: the league isn't profitable. That's when the walkout happened. Not because of new numbers, but because the players were asking the one thing owners wouldn't give: proof. In that refusal lies the real story. While headlines shout about debt, the actual numbers stay hidden, creating a power imbalance that defines the entire conflict. The proposed deals dangle higher pay in theory, but in practice tie everything to elusive benchmarks. Players, who have become the product and the marketing engine, are left chasing incentives while owners secure the future. It's not just about revenue. It's about who controls the truth. And until that changes, the league's growth remains a fragile illusion, easily broken by one misstep or a single injured star. It was supposed to be the season that changed everything. New fans, historic viewership, packed arenas, a rookie class turning every game into a trending topic, expansion franchises fetching massive price tags, and a media machine finally giving women's basketball the attention it deserved. But then came the number, $90 million. That's the figure that turned a victory lap into a boardroom brawl. That's the number reportedly dropped in a closed-door meeting between league leadership and team owners, followed by the commissioner walking out. Because behind the headlines about record-breaking growth, the financial foundation of the WNBA is being called into question.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
The league's owners claim it's deeply in debt, structurally unstable, and still unprofitable despite all the noise. And that is why they won't budge on the issue players care about most: revenue sharing. The message from the top is clear: don't be fooled by the hype. Behind the bright lights and viral clips, the WNBA is still operating in the red. Except there's a problem. The people making these claims, the owners, refuse to show their math. No open books, no transparency, no detailed financial breakdown. Just vague losses and conveniently timed leaks to the press. Meanwhile, the players, the ones fueling this growth, are being told to sit tight, to keep performing, keep building the brand, keep carrying the league forward, but not expect to share in the profits unless arbitrary benchmarks are met. That's not partnership. That's not fair compensation. That's control. The current revenue-sharing proposal from the league isn't just stingy, it's strategically conditional. On the surface, it sounds generous. Salary increases, bonuses, more money than ever if the league hits growth targets. What those targets are, unclear. How they're calculated, not public. How players can verify if they're met. They can't. This is how you structure a system to benefit one side. You create rules that can't be challenged, metrics that can't be proven, promises that look good on paper but are built to be delayed. It's a classic deflection tactic. Offer something that sounds reasonable but is impossible to reach, then blame the players for not earning it. But here's the problem for the owners. The players aren't staying quiet anymore because they know what's happening on the ground. They see the ticket sales. They hear the crowd sizes. They watch their own social media engagement skyrocket. They feel the change happening in real time. And yet, when they ask to be treated like true partners in that growth, the league says we're not there yet. How much bigger does it need to get? The viewership is at an all-time high. Expansion fees are reportedly in the tens of millions. Sponsors are lining up. Merch is flying. Players like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are generating more buzz than some entire NBA teams. If this isn't enough to trigger equitable compensation, what is? And that's the question at the heart of this entire standoff. Who gets to decide when the WNBA is ready? Right now, it's the owners. The same ones claiming they're absorbing massive losses while investing aggressively in league expansion and media rights. The same ones who have everything to gain from keeping the books closed and the payout small. Their position is that a 50-50 split like the NBA's is too risky. That the league's current surge could be temporary. that the whole system is too reliant on a few superstars, and one injury could tank everything. They point to Caitlin Clark's absence and the reported 55% drop in viewership that followed as evidence of this fragility. And in doing so, they justify caution. Caution in spending, caution in sharing, caution in trust. But that logic falls apart under scrutiny. 2. Yes, Clark is a star. So are others. And yes, that kind of visibility can create dependency. But it also reveals the real issue. The league hasn't invested in building more stars. It hasn't built a system designed for depth. It's built one that relies on a few breakout players to carry the weight of an entire product. That's not a player problem. That's a structural failure. The risk they're so afraid of, it could be fixed with smarter investment, a broader marketing strategy, a commitment to telling more stories and promoting more names. But instead of building out the league, they're trying to freeze the growth until they feel safe, until they've squeezed every dollar out of the moment before having to share it. And they're doing it behind a narrative of fear. We can't afford to give you more yet. Which brings us back to that walkout. When the commissioner stormed out of negotiations, it was framed as a response to unrealistic player demands. But in reality, it was a reaction to pressure. Players were asking for transparency, for hard numbers, for a real conversation about where the money is going and why they're not seeing it. And instead of providing answers, leadership shut it down. That's not just a missed opportunity, it's a red flag. Because now, the players are more unified than ever. And they've got leverage. They have the fan base. They have the media. They have the spotlight. And if this thing heads toward a lockout, the blame won't fall on the players. It'll land squarely on the owners who refuse to let go of a rigged revenue model. And make no mistake, the threat of a lockout is very real. If the league and players can't come to terms, it's not just paychecks at risk, it's momentum. It's everything the WNBA has built in the last year. Fans don't stick around forever. Public goodwill doesn't last without trust. And one ugly labor dispute could unravel the entire narrative the league has worked so hard to build. The players know this, and they're still pushing, because they also know that if they cave now, it sets the tone for the next decade. They're not demanding ownership stakes. They're not asking for NBA-level contracts. They're asking for a share of what they've helped create, for access to numbers that dictate their futures, for a system that rewards success instead of hiding behind moving targets and fake losses. The owners say it's too soon. The players say this is the moment. So who's right? Is the league really too fragile to share profits? Or are the owners just afraid to lose control? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if you're tired of the same excuses and want real equity in women's sports. Share it if you think players deserve more than conditional promises. And subscribe to keep up as this negotiation showdown gets even messier. Because if there's one thing we've learned, it's that the game may be growing, but the fight for fairness is just getting started. The most frustrating part? The numbers don't lie, but they're being kept hidden. We're supposed to take the owners at their word. That despite all the hype, all the ticket sellouts, all the brand deals, and all the record-breaking viewership, the WNBA is still somehow sinking. That it's operating under a cloud of $90 million in losses. That it's just not the right time to open the vault and share the wealth. But then the next day, an expansion franchise gets sold for tens of millions. Media companies are lining up to secure rights deals. And investors are fighting to buy into a league that's supposedly bleeding out. That's not how failing businesses work. That's how valuable assets move in silence. And the people creating that value, the players, are being gaslit at scale. They're told there's no profit while their likeness sells jerseys, while brands feature them in primetime commercials, while clips of their games dominate social media. So when the players finally say, "Show us the books," and the commissioner walks out of the room, that's not about bad manners. That's about power. That's a refusal to explain, a refusal to justify, a refusal to be held accountable. And now, it's blowing up in real time. This negotiation isn't about adjusting salaries. This is a battle over who gets to own the league's story moving forward. Right now, the owners are clinging to a decades-old narrative. We're losing money Be patient. But the new generation of players and fans aren't buying that anymore. Because what we're seeing on the court doesn't match what's being said behind closed doors. Attendance is up. Ratings are up. The WNBA is in headlines every week, sometimes every day. Rookie contracts are a topic of national debate. Players are charting on jersey sales lists alongside NBA stars. And yet, they're still being told to wait for revenue sharing? Let's break this down clearly. The owners are using a conditional revenue sharing model, one that sounds nice on a press release but has historically failed players. The league sets arbitrary growth targets. If the players hit those targets, they get a cut. But those targets are often so difficult to reach or so vaguely defined that the players are always chasing a moving goalpost. It's not a partnership. It's a performance test with no answer key. And this structure is intentional. The less transparency there is, the more power the owners retain. If the players don't know what they're helping the league earn, they can't argue for a fair share. If the public doesn't know what the league is actually worth, they can't pressure the league to change. That's why players are fighting not just for money, but for information, for clarity, for the right to know how their value is being calculated. And right now, that value is being inflated publicly, then suppressed privately. Look at the timing of all these anonymous reports about $90 million in losses. They always pop up during negotiations. Just like the media push about Clark's injury leading to a 55% viewership drop. That stat wasn't dropped for fun. It was dropped as leverage. It tells the public, see, the league is too fragile to promise players real money. But let's not pretend like this wasn't predictable. Of course, the league's viewership is sensitive because it's still reliant on just a few superstars to drive everything. That's not a Caitlin Clark issue. That's a league-building issue. That's on ownership. They want the upside of stardom, but none of the responsibility that comes with investing in multiple stars. They want the revenue growth, but none of the risk that comes with treating players as partners. And when things get rocky, they fall back on the same talking point. It's not sustainable. But what they're really saying is, we're not ready to share. And that hesitation is threatening everything. The WNBA has never had more momentum. But momentum is only valuable if you know how to handle it. Right now, that momentum is being fumbled by a leadership class more concerned with control than progress. And the longer this conflict drags on, the more likely it becomes that we're headed for a lockout. Two, which would be catastrophic. A lockout during this wave of popularity wouldn't just slow growth, it would erase it. Fans are watching. Casuals are converting into diehards. New markets are opening. But all of that goodwill has an expiration date. If the league can't get its internal house in order, people will tune out. And if that happens, that's on ownership, not the players. Because the players aren't asking for miracles. They're not demanding NBA-level money. They're asking for a deal that reflects what they've already done. For compensation tied to growth they've already driven. For transparency in a business they help sell every single day. They're not the problem. They're the product. And they're finally calling out a business model built to keep them boxed. And while the league sells a success story to investors, you can't keep selling growth to the media and poverty to the players. At some point, those narratives collide. And when they do, the truth becomes impossible to deny. Someone is profiting off this growth. It's just not the people making it happen. If the league truly believes in long-term growth, then now is the time to invest in trust. Open the books. Build an equitable model. Treat the players like stakeholders, not just employees who are lucky to be there. Because this strategy of delay and silence, it's running out of road. The commissioner walking out of negotiations didn't kill this conversation. It lit a fuse. And now, the pressure is on. Players are mobilized. Fans are informed. Media outlets are asking better questions. And every time the league doubles down on secrecy, the backlash gets louder. This isn't about whether the WNBA is profitable enough. It's about whether the people profiting off the game are willing to share. Because the math already tells us what we need to know. People are watching. People are spending. The league is growing. So the next time you hear a statement about unmet revenue targets or unsustainable compensation models, ask yourself, Who's actually setting those targets? Who decides what's sustainable? And who benefits from keeping the numbers vague? Because until those questions are answered, players will keep pushing. And fans should keep demanding better. And now, the silence is louder than ever. Since that explosive walkout, the WNBA's leadership has gone into damage control mode, publicly pretending things are in progress, while privately letting the tension simmer. But the players? They're done waiting. The walkout didn't intimidate them. It confirmed everything they suspected. The league is playing defense, not just on finances, but on accountability. Let's be very clear. A commissioner doesn't walk out of a meeting because they're surprised by debt. That's not new information. That's not a sudden revelation. It's a deflection, a way to avoid the one thing the players have been asking for from the beginning: transparency. They want to know where the money is, who's controlling it, what the real numbers look like behind all these massive investments, growing media coverage, and increased league attention. And instead of answers, they got a door slammed in their faces. But this time, the players aren't just backing down and going back to work. They're speaking out. They're uniting. Because they know something's off. They know the WNBA doesn't look like a league drowning in debt. It looks like a business blooming and conveniently hiding its harvest. Let's look at what's actually happening. Over the last year, the WNBA has experienced the biggest growth surge in its history. Ratings are up across the board. Caitlin Clark's games are doing NBA-level numbers. Rookie matchups are becoming must-watch television. Sponsorships are growing. Tickets are being resold at 3 to 4 times face value in some markets. And brand engagement? Off the charts. But when the conversation turns to money, the tone shifts. Suddenly, we're back to the league is in debt. Suddenly, we're hearing about how much it costs to keep operations running, about how risky it is to commit to player revenue sharing when just one injury can crash ratings. That's not business logic. That's fear disguised as fiscal responsibility. Because here's the thing about business. Investors invest in growth. They take short-term hits to build long-term value. That's how the NBA became what it is. That's how the WNBA is supposed to become what it can be. You grow the pie, and you share it. You don't hoard it behind vague excuses and unverified numbers. And yet, that's what WNBA owners are doing. Every time the players make noise, the league responds with another carefully timed leak to the media, anonymous claims of financial distress, mysterious reports of unmet benchmarks, convenient narratives about how players just don't understand the economics of sports. But players do understand. They understand they're not just athletes anymore. They're content. Every viral moment, every tweet, every tunnel walk, every hard foul, every clutch shot that makes SportsCenter, that's value, and they know it. And what are they getting in return? Conditional salary increases based on moving targets. Revenue shares that only kick in after arbitrary growth benchmarks. No visibility into whether those targets were even hit. No real seat at the table where decisions are being made. It's not just about money. It's about power. Because when you control the numbers, you control the narrative. And right now, the league is using that control to convince the public that the players are being unreasonable. But let's ask the obvious question. If the WNBA is truly in financial crisis, why are expansion teams going for 8-figure valuations? Why are streaming platforms bidding for broadcast rights? Why are sponsors increasing their spend year over year? Because the league isn't failing, it's changing. And the people in charge aren't ready for that. Be president. Photos. They've been comfortable running the WNBA like a niche property, something to support for optics. But that version of the league doesn't exist anymore. Now it's a hot product with global attention. It's an asset, and that makes the players, the people driving every single click, ticket, and headline, a threat to the balance of power. And if you think this is just about one side wanting more money, look again. This is about access, ownership, fairness, the right to grow with the league they've built. The current compensation model is outdated and insulting, telling players they can earn more if the league performs, without ever showing them what those numbers are, is like giving someone a map with no landmarks and blaming them for getting lost. That's not how you treat partners. That's how you treat people you want to keep in check. And the players aren't having it. They've seen what's possible when athletes demand more. They watched women's soccer fight and win. They've seen how NBA stars shape their league by refusing to be shut out of business conversations. They know they're the business. 2. They also know a lockout is on the table, and they're not afraid of it. Because they understand the stakes. A lockout would hurt, yes. But continuing under a system that limits their value, hides the books, and delays fairness indefinitely, that's worse. They're playing the long game. And here's what the owners are underestimating. The fans are watching. This isn't 2005, when player-owner conflict stayed behind boardroom doors. This is 2025, where every quote gets dissected online, where fan loyalty depends on honesty, and where the players have direct platforms bigger than most team accounts. You try to bury this fight, and it's going to come back louder. Try to spin the narrative, and players will flip it in real time. Try to paint them as greedy, and the receipts will show otherwise. Because the public is smarter than it used to be. They know when someone's stalling. They know when corporate language is covering up inequality. And they know this league is worth more than it's being treated. So what now? The owners have a choice. Double down on secrecy and risk the league's momentum, or shift strategy. Open the books and start treating players like partners. It really is that simple. If the WNBA is what it claims to be, on the edge of real, sustained success, then transparency shouldn't be scary. It should be a welcome confirmation of progress. But the refusal to share financial details, even after players have directly asked, shows that ownership isn't just hesitant, it's scared. Scared that the numbers do justify player demands. Scared that once the players have visibility, they'll start asking for even more. Scared that the power dynamic will shift. And honestly, it should, because this isn't the league of 20 years ago. This is a league standing in its most defining moment. A league that has a chance to lead, not just in sports, but in how women's sports are valued, marketed, and compensated. But if leadership keeps walking out of rooms instead of walking toward solutions, they're not just risking a lockout. They're risking losing the very people who made this moment possible. 2. And the fans will remember. So where do you stand? Are the owners justified in holding back until they feel safe? Or should the players get what they've earned? Real revenue sharing, real visibility, and a real say in the business they built? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like this if you're tired of vague excuses. Share it with someone who thinks growth should mean equity. And hit that subscribe button to stay in the loop, because this story, it's not slowing, it's about money. It's about power. It's about respect. And the next move? It better be the right one.